Now we have After Effects here, okay? Now go ahead and create a new composition. Go ahead and create a new solid, okay? Make it any color you want. For me, I'm gonna pick gold, okay? And now let's create a shape here on our animation. So I'm going to choose the ellipse tool, set my my cursor here on the anchor point on the middle here, click, hold, click, Control and Shift, hold, and drag on my mouse so I can get a perfect circle. Right now we have this perfect circle right here. I'm gonna leave it like that. Now what I'm going to do right now is open up the transform options. After I made sure that my mask is well, as you saw in the previous episode. Now let's start animating this. Now whenever you add anything in After Effects, let me say an effect, okay, or the transform option, you will always see the stopwatch icon on some values. This is what allows us to actually animate. Let me say I want to move this circle from left to right, so I'm going to move this to the left, like right here, and what I want to do is animate it going this way to the right. So I put a stopwatch, I activate the stopwatch here by clicking on it, okay, and you will see now we have a keyframe. Now a keyframe is a point that allows us to mark the details value of our circle right here. So for example, now we are working on position value. If you put a keyframe, it will record that this circle was at this point in this part of the timeline. Now if I move forward to 10 seconds, right, and then I change the position to the end here, you can see now it has automatically added another keyframe here, and this keyframe marks the value that the circle is on this part of our preview monitor, on this part of the timeline. So anything in between will be the change of the value from this to this. So for example, right here the position was 165 by 540, and the position on this here is 1759 by 540, which means anything in between here, as you can see, if I move my playhead, you can see the values also change here on the position. Anything in between will change to get the recorded values of the keyframe. So in case you let me say on the 5 second here, you tend to change the position. Let me say you change the position like right here, you set it up like this, it will record the values here. You can see right now it's on this keyframe is 540, then we changed it here to 328, and here it's 540. So anything in between here will tend to change, and at the time as you are looking at the values, you can also see circle here is being animated, and that is the work of the keyframe. Now if I set it in the beginning and play, you can see right now it actually changes. Now let me decrease the duration of my timeline here to like 5 seconds. Now I can do this by taking my arrow here to the work area end, and once I get this icon, right, I can click, hold, and drag this to 5 seconds, and once it's where I want, I will type on my keyboard Control Shift X, and it will actually trim my work area to where I placed this work end line here. Now I'm going to put my keyframe back. You can see if I play, it's a bit faster because we set the value to 10 seconds duration, but now it's about 5 seconds duration, and this works on all of them. So let me say I want to rotate this. I'm going to mask here a rectangle, and I'm going to change this to subtract. Now you can see our shape, our circle is a little bit changed. So what I want to change is the rotation value. So if I click on rotation here, I add a stopwatch. Right now it's on 0, but if I come to the end here, I think this is where it should be, the other keyframe, and change the rotation here to 360, 359, and it will turn here to 1, which is 360. Once I play, you can see it's actually rolling here, and just like that you have an animation. And the keyframes do work in all the values that you play around in After Effects. But right now, if you look at the animation, it's pretty linear. It has the same speed from the beginning to the end. But let's say you want to smooth it out, make it a little bit smooth or a little bit fast in the beginning and slows in the end. What do? What you can do is actually highlight your keyframes and click on your keyboard F9, and it will ease your keyframe. So for example, now you can see it start out slowly, then it takes speed and finishes up slowly. If you go ahead and select your keyframes and right click on one of them, you can see here we have something called Keyframe Assistant. Okay, set your mouse on Keyframe Assistant. You can see we have options here to ease out our animation. You have easy ease, you have easy in, and you have ease out. Let me show you a quick difference of what exactly this. I'm going to deactivate the stopwatches here. Then what I'm going to do is duplicate this by clicking on Control D on my keyboard, or you can come to edit here and duplicate. Okay, now open up position properties here, and what I'm going to do is move this on top, move the bottom one on the bottom here. I'm going to change the X properties. Okay, activate the stopwatch, come to the end of the timeline here, highlight all of them, and then move them on the other side here of the preview monitor. Okay, I'm going to do the same with the rotation. Select all of them, click R on your keyboard, activate the stopwatch, come to the end of the timeline here, rotate them until we get 360 degrees here. Once you play it, the movement is all linear. What you want to do now is test out the difference between the easy ease. I'm going to select all of them, Shift and P on my keyboard so I can get the position properties. And by the way, if you want to open up the transform options one by one, you can actually click on your keyboard. P is for position, S is for scale, R is for rotation, and T is for opacity. Okay, but in case you want to open up, let me say 2 of them, you can actually click on one. So let's say rotation, and then hold Shift and click like position or scale, and it will open up the second one. And now you have a clean timeline to work with. We have our position and rotation values here that we used to work with. Now I'm going to take the first solid here, and then highlight the keyframe, go to right click Keyframe Assistant, and I'm going to choose easy ease. Go on the middle one, which is right here, and easy in. The bottom layer, right click Keyframe Assistant, and I'm going to select ease out. And now if you play, you can see the difference between the speed of the ease. Easy ease starts out slowly, picks up some speed, and then ends up slowly. Easy in starts out with the speed, then it eases into the end, and ease out starts out slowly and picks out speed towards the end. So you can actually combine these settings. You can actually put here ease out and easy in here, play it around and see how it works for you. Another thing that people always add in keyframes animation is motion blur, because in real life anything that moves, it's hard to be caught by your naked eye. So when you move around anything, you always get motion blur. And that's the same when you are animating. You always want to have motion blur in your animation so it will look realistic. Now to activate motion blur, you actually need to select to activate this switch right here. Now you have enabled motion blur. Now if you come to your layers and click on here, you have motion blur on your animation. Let's go ahead and delete the bottom and the top solid, right? And open up the rotation and the position properties that have our keyframes. Right now, you haven't fully understood about keyframes unless you know how to use the graph editor. As you can see right here, we do have our keyframes, and anytime you select your keyframes and come down to the graph editor, right, and click on this, you will see that you do have these curved lines down here on the graph. Now these values right here represent the speed on your timeline. So 0 is the lowest speed and 400 is the fastest speed. Now you can see down here you have this icon, right? And it allows you to choose different types of graphs. Now, the graph that is mostly used when animating keyframes is the speed graph, because it's simple and easy to understand. And by default, you might open up your After Effects and find it's on a value editor graph, which is a bit confusing because it does show you the keyframes according to the value number that it has, but the speed graph actually represents the speed according to the nature or how the graph is shown. What I'm going to do now is select all these keyframes, right, and click F9 on my keyboard so I can get easy ease. And now if I select position and come back to the graph, you can see now we have something we can understand a bit more, because easy ease starts out slowly, picks up speed, and then ends up slowly, just as how we can see here on the speed graph. Since this is the default easy ease settings, what we can do is manually adjust the speed. So if you click on this dot here on the line, you can see you'll see handles on your graph. Now you can click, hold, and drag these handles and change them in different ways. For example, right now, if I move this right here, it will start out slowly and then pick up speed, then finish. And then I'm going to do the same here on the rotation. Click on this handle, drag it to this side, and now if we play, you can see it starts out slowly, picks up speed, and then finishes off. If you select on the values, one by one will appear, but you can select both of them by holding Control on your keyboard and selecting the second one, and you can see here you have the values plus the color, which represent the graph that you are working with. This color represents this graph and this color represents this graph. And once you click on the graph, the handles will show and you can adjust each graph while seeing all of them. But I like actually working on one by one because it's a bit more clean. Here you can do a couple of different types of animation. You can actually change this. Click on the graph editor, select the position, right? So let me say I click on this handle, right, and drag this like this, and then adjust this this way. So if I come back and play, you can see it has a different kind of animation. I'll do the same on the rotation here. Click on this handle, drag it back until you get it completely flat, and then hold this handle and drag it this way. Now if I play, you can see it starts out quickly and then finishes off smoothly. Now this is the best way to actually animate your speed graph, and always remember to activate the motion blur on your layer so it can be a little more realistic. As you can see right here, we have this motion blur activated, and now when it plays back, you can see it's more realistic and interesting to watch. Another thing that you need to understand about keyframes is you can actually add in expressions to these keyframes. So for example, let's create another solid here. Okay, right click, new solid, right click OK. Make this a rounded rectangle, right? Click here on the middle, hold Ctrl and Shift, drag, and now let's open up the rotation properties. I'm going to move my anchor point here right to the corner. Okay, activate my stopwatch. Okay, move 2.5 seconds. Okay, let me drag my timeline here. 2.5 seconds is right here. Now let me change the values here and make it. Now I need to make sure this is a straight line. So what I need to do is magnify this preview monitor here. I'm going to choose like 400, take the hand gesture tool, and I move it. And if I see a straight line here, I know it's aligned, because if it was not aligned, okay, let me take the selection tool. If it was not aligned, you can see it's a little bit pixelated here, but if it's clean, you know that's a straight line. And of course it's 90 degrees. I'm going to go to the end of my timeline, okay, fit my comp, and of course if you magnify your preview here and use the hand tool to move around here, okay, it doesn't affect your artwork, it just affects the preview monitor if you use the hand. And now on the end of my timeline here, I am going to select the rotation and change the values back to 0. Okay, and now if I play, I have something like this. Now by default you can see it's looping because the playhead is going to the end of the timeline now. But if you export this, it's actually just one single animation from left to right. Now if I select all my keyframes, okay, and then hold Alt on my keyboard, I can evenly push them close to one another. Okay, now I'm going to make it like this. Now I want it to wiggle around, to wave around in a loop, but now you can see if I play it around, it doesn't actually loop. Now that's when expressions come into place. Hold Alt on your keyboard and click on the stopwatch. You see now we have the values turned into red, but also we have the options here to type in some coding. Luckily enough, we do have ready-made expressions here on the expression language menu. If you click on this icon, you can see when you come to property here, you have different options to actually loop out and loop in. So if I choose in loop out circle, for example, you can see it has already typed in the coding for me. I will click anywhere, and now if I play, you see it will wiggle around throughout the timeline. Okay, but loop out is actually animating from the beginning of my keyframes to infinity. So if I move these keyframes like right here, it won't actually animate until it meets the keyframes. But for example, if I change this to properties and choose loop in, okay, loop in circle, and click anywhere, you can see now it doesn't loop out in the end. That's because this option allows you to animate your artwork from the beginning to where the keyframes are. So if I move these keyframes to the end of my timeline, you will see that it animates throughout the timeline. Or if I move them forward, it will animate from the beginning here, it will meet my keyframes, and then it will stop. Easiest way to type in expressions in your animation. Always remember to add in motion blur to your animation. As you can see now, properties, loop out circle, you can see now it animates, you see, with motion blur, which is more realistic. Now you can also change the speed of this by clicking Alt and spacing out your keyframes, and the animation will be much slower. But also right click and go back to the easy ease options that we had before. You can click F9 on your keyboard and you get the easy ease options. And if you open the speed graph, okay, let's just make sure we are on the speed graph here. You can see now the speed graph is on a S shape. Now in the beginning it was just bottom, up and down, but right now it's like a S shape. This is because this marks the positive values and this marks the negative values. Okay, so right here you can see it starts slowly, it picks up speed, and then it ends up slowly, but it was on the right side of the animation, which is the positive values. Now we did animate it back, which was the negative animation of what we did before, the negative values, which goes on the left, which is marked by this graph on the bottom here. So it will start out slowly, then picks up speed, and then go back and ends up slowly. But we can still adjust the animation here as we did before. You can move these handles here and change the animation, make it animate like this. Now if I go back here and highlight this, hold Alt on my keyboard and expand or squeeze these keyframes together. So if I do this, you see now we have a different type of animation. And that's it on this video. Your task now is create a bunch of shapes, okay, and animate them using the stopwatch that you see right here. But also remember to click Alt on your keyboard and click on the stopwatch so you can get expression language menu opened up, and then come to the properties here and loop it out and wiggle it and just play around with this animation until you get used to to them. Now, episode 6 is about text and text animation, but also we are going to take all the knowledge that we used before and create a simple lower third